The impossible equation. Picture a room thick with cigarette smoke. London, autumn, 1943. Around a scarred oak table sit men whose decisions will reshape the world. General Dwight Eisenhower, newly appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, leans forward, elbows on a map of France that's been marked and remarked until the paper threatens to tear. Beside him, British Admiral Bertram Ramsay, the man who pulled off the miracle at Dunkirk, evacuating 338,000 troops from certain annihilation, stares at a notepad filled with numbers that refuse to add up. Eisenhower breaks the silence with a question that sounds simple, but isn't. How many ships do we need? Ramsay doesn't answer immediately. He's been calculating for weeks, running scenarios, factoring variables. 5 invasion beaches across 50 miles of French coastline. 156,000 men to land on the first day. Tanks, trucks, artillery, ammunition, fuel, food, medical supplies. All of it has to cross 20 miles of open water, land on hostile beaches under German fire, and keep coming in waves for days, weeks, months. He finally speaks, voice dry as old parchment. 7,000 vessels, give or take. The room goes quiet. Not shocked quiet. These are men who've planned campaigns across continents, but the quiet of people confronting a number so large it warps comprehension. 7,000 ships. For context, the Spanish Armada that tried to invade England in 1588 fielded 130 ships, and historians still write books about its scale. The largest naval operation in British history before this moment was probably Trafalgar, 33 British ships against 41 Franco-Spanish vessels. Ramsay is talking about 200 times that. Eisenhower, to his credit, doesn't flinch. Where do we get them? The question hangs in the smoky air because everyone in the room knows the answer, even if no one wants to say it out loud. Britain, bombed and blockaded for 4 years, is building ships as fast as humanly possible. But British shipyards are also repairing battle damage from convoy duty in the North Atlantic, maintaining the home fleet, constructing destroyers to fight U-boats. There is no slack capacity, no hidden reserve of shipyards that can suddenly conjure thousands of landing craft. An American liaison officer, a Navy commander, whose name will be forgotten by history but whose presence in this room matters enormously, clears his throat. We can build them, it's stated matter-of-factly, without bravado. Not, we might be able to, or we'll try. Just, we can build them. Ramsay, who has spent 3 decades in the Royal Navy and understands shipbuilding timelines with painful intimacy, looks skeptical. Building landing craft isn't like stamping out rifles. Each LST landing ship tank is essentially a small ocean-going vessel capable of crossing the Atlantic, beaching itself, disgorging 20 Sherman tanks, then retracting and doing it again. These aren't rowboats. They're complex pieces of engineering requiring steel, engines, electrical systems, skilled labor. The American commander meets his gaze. We're already building them. Have been since Lend-Lease passed in 41. Current production rate is about 40 LSTs per month across all yards. We can increase that. 40 per month. Ramsay does the mental math. Even at that rate, building the hundreds of LSTs needed for Overlord would take. The American anticipates the calculation. We're not starting from zero, Admiral. We've got LSTs coming off the lines in New Orleans, Norfolk, Pittsburgh, Evansville. We can have 300 ready by spring. More if you need them. This is where the story of D-Day's naval armada truly begins. Not in the dramatic crossing of the Channel on June 6, 1944. Not even in the assembly of ships in British harbors that spring. But here, in this smoky room in London, where American industrial capacity is casually mentioned as if building hundreds of ocean-crossing landing craft in 6 months is normal, because for America in 1943, it is normal. British planners, conditioned by 5 years of scarcity, every ton of steel carefully allocated, every resource stretched thin, are operating in one mental universe. The Americans, whose factories haven't been bombed, whose supply lines haven't been cut, whose economy has been turbocharged by wartime production, are operating in another. Historian Stephen Ambrose would later describe American industrial output during World War II as the decisive factor in Allied victory, outproducing the Axis powers combined. But statistics, millions of tons of shipping, thousands of aircraft are abstractions. The reality is being negotiated in this room. Eisenhower, sensing the psychological gap, leans back and addresses the Americans directly. Can you really deliver that many ships? Because if we plan an invasion of this scale and the landing craft don't show up, we're not just talking about a failed operation. We're talking about tens of thousands of dead soldiers. The American commander doesn't hesitate. General, right now in American shipyards, we're completing 3 Liberty ships per day. That's just cargo vessels. For landing craft, we've converted automobile factories, steel mills, and construction companies into naval production. We can deliver. This is the moment when the impossible equation starts to balance. Not because the numbers suddenly make sense, 7,000 ships is still an almost incomprehensible figure, but because the Americans have introduced a new variable into the calculation: scale. Britain thinks in terms of what it has. America thinks in terms of what it can build. The meeting continues late into the night. Planners drilling down into specifics. How many LCVPs, the small Higgins boats that will carry troops from ships to shore? Thousands. How many LCIs, landing craft infantry, for 200 men each? Hundreds. Fire support, battleships to bombard German positions. We'll bring Nevada, Texas, Arkansas, all veterans of Pearl Harbor, raised, repaired, and ready to fight. With each answer, the British officers in the room recalibrate their understanding of what's possible. Ramsey, jotting notes, pauses, and looks up. You're describing an invasion fleet larger than anything in human history. You understand that? The American commander nods. Yes, sir. That's the idea. Outside the conference room, London sleeps fitfully under blackout conditions. Somewhere in the darkness, British factory workers are machining parts for ships that will take months to complete. Across the Atlantic, in cities most Britons have never heard of: Evansville, Indiana, Seneca, Illinois, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. American workers are doing the same thing, but faster, in greater numbers, with more raw materials than Britain has seen in years. The industrial mobilization of America is not just about quantity. Though the quantities are staggering, it's about a fundamental reimagining of what war production can be. Henry Kaiser, the industrialist who revolutionized shipbuilding, has turned Liberty ship construction into an assembly line process. Prefabricated sections, welded instead of riveted, cranes instead of manual labor. What used to take a year now takes weeks. His record, Liberty ship SS Robert E. Peary. Built in 4 days and 15 hours, from keel laying to launch, will become legend. But even routine production is astonishing. Complete ocean-going cargo vessels every 42 days on average. The landing craft benefit from the same innovation. Andrew Higgins, a New Orleans boat builder, has designed the LCVP, the ubiquitous Higgins boat, with brilliant simplicity: a flat bottom, a front ramp, and plywood sides. It can be built by furniture makers and piano manufacturers converted to war production. By 1944, Higgins Industries will be producing 700 landing craft per month. 700 per month. Back in the planning room, as dawn breaks over blacked-out London, Eisenhower stands and surveys the men around the table. Gentlemen, we're going to invade France in the spring. The success of that invasion depends entirely on getting enough ships to the right places at the right time. Admiral Ramsey will coordinate the British contribution. The Americans will provide the bulk of the landing craft and significant fire support. Together, we'll build the largest fleet ever assembled. He pauses, lets the weight of it settle, and then we're going to sail across the Channel and liberate Europe. It's delivered with Eisenhower's characteristic blend of optimism and steel. But everyone in the room understands the subtext. This plan only works if the Americans deliver. If the ships they're promising actually arrive. If American industrial capacity, for all its impressive statistics, can translate into steel hulls in British harbors by spring. Ramsay walks out into the grey London morning and stands for a moment, breathing cold air. He's orchestrated complex naval operations before. He understands logistics, coordination, the intricate choreography of getting thousands of men and tons of equipment from point A to point B under hostile conditions. But this is different. This isn't adapting existing resources or making do with what's available. This is betting everything on the ability of a nation 3,000 miles away to build a fleet from scratch in 6 months and sail it across a submarine-infested ocean in time for the largest amphibious invasion in history. He thinks about Dunkirk, where every available boat fishing trawlers, private yachts, Thames River ferries was pressed into service to save the British Army. A heroic improvisation born of desperate necessity. Overlord will be the opposite. Not improvisation, but precision. Not desperation, but overwhelming force. Not making do, but having more than enough. If the Americans deliver, Ramsay lights a cigarette and watches the smoke curl into the morning sky. In 6 months, he'll know whether American confidence is justified or delusional. In 6 months, British harbors will either be full of the largest invasion fleet in history, or they'll be full of excuses about production delays and logistical challenges and ambitious promises that couldn't quite be kept. He finishes the cigarette and heads back inside to start coordinating with American planners, because either way, there's work to do. And the clock is ticking towards spring 1944. The steel tide begins. January 1944. Portsmouth Harbour, England. British Rear Admiral Harold Burrow stands at his office window, binoculars raised, watching a convoy enter the Sound. 18 ships. American Liberty ships, their grey hulls sitting low in the water. Decks stacked with cargo covered by tarps lashed tight against Atlantic spray. His logistics officer appears at his shoulder. "Sir, that's the 43rd American convoy in the past 3 weeks." Burrow lowers the binoculars slowly. 43 convoys. He's been coordinating naval operations for 30 years. Has seen the Grand Fleet assembled at Scapa Flow during the Great War. Has watched the painful buildup of British naval power through the lean years between the wars. But this is different, not because of any single convoy, but because they keep coming, day after day, week after week. An unending stream of American vessels crossing the Atlantic, each one carrying pieces of an invasion fleet. How many American ships total in British ports now? The officer consults his clipboard. 217 as of this morning's count, sir. Not including landing craft still under construction or vessels we expect next week. 217. Burrow does the math in his head. At the current rate, by spring there will be. He stops calculating because the numbers are becoming absurd. Down in the harbor, stevedores are already swarming the newly arrived ships, unloading crates of equipment, vehicles, supplies. American efficiency is on full display. Forklifts, cargo nets, coordinated teams working with industrial precision. This isn't Britain's careful rationing of scarce resources. This is abundance applied with mechanical ruthlessness. Across the Channel approaches, similar scenes are playing out at every major port on England's southern coast. At Plymouth, Harbour Master Captain James Wilkes watches another convoy of LSTs landing ship-tank maneuver into already crowded anchorages. The LSTs are unmistakable. Flat-bottomed, bow doors that can open to disgorge tanks directly onto beaches. Ugly, but brilliantly functional. Sir, where do we put them? It's becoming the daily question. Wilkes stares at his harbor chart. Every available anchorage, already marked with a ship's position. Anchor them in a line extending into the Sound. Bow to stern. Make it work. The Americans comply without complaint, their vessels creating floating piers that stretch for miles. By February, the trickle has become a flood that threatens to drown British harbors in steel. At Falmouth, the harbour master reports that ships are packed so densely you could walk from one side of the harbour to the other by stepping from deck to deck. At Southampton, every available pier is stacked 3 deep with American vessels. At Weymouth, local fishermen forbidden from taking their boats out due to military restrictions stand on the seawall and count ships until they give up at 300. One old fisherman, who's worked these waters for 40 years, shakes his head in disbelief. The sea's gone. Just ships now, far as you can see. It's not just the numbers, though. The numbers are staggering. It's the types of vessels that reveal the depth of American planning. LSTs, capable of crossing oceans and beaching themselves. LCIs, landing craft infantry, designed to carry 200 troops directly to shore. LCVPs, the small Higgins boats hanging from davits by the hundreds, ready to be lowered and loaded. LCTs, landing craft. Tank, medium-sized vessels for shorter hauls. Each category with subcategories. Each designed for specific purposes. Each built in American shipyards at rates that defy British comprehension. Admiral Sir Philip Vian, commanding the Eastern Task Force that will assault Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches, tours the American anchorages in early March. He needs to understand what capabilities his American counterparts are bringing. At Portland, he boards USS Texas, a battleship whose 14-inch guns can throw 1,400-pound shells more than 20 miles inland. An American liaison officer walks him through the fire support plan. Texas is one of 3 battleships we're bringing, sir. Nevada and Arkansas are at Plymouth, plus 3 heavy cruisers, 7 light cruisers, and 34 destroyers assigned to Western Task Force alone. Vian, whose entire naval career has been shaped by British resource constraints, does the mental arithmetic. The Americans are bringing more heavy gunfire support to their 2 beaches than the entire Royal Navy has available for 3 British beaches, and they're also providing significant support to British sectors. But impressive as the battleships are, they're not what makes the invasion possible. The landing craft are. By late March, British port commanders are sending increasingly desperate reports to the Admiralty. We're out of space, every harbor full, every anchorage packed, ships anchored in lines extending miles out to sea, and still they keep coming. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay, Allied Naval Commander for Operation Neptune, maintains his headquarters at Southwick House near Portsmouth. His walls are covered with charts showing ship positions, convoy routes, assembly areas. Colored pins mark thousands of vessels. His chief of staff enters with the latest count. Sir, current total, 4,847 vessels in British waters assigned to Overlord. Americans have delivered 2,316 landing craft of various types. Ramsay studies the numbers with the clinical precision of a man who's spent 18 months planning this operation. 2,316 landing craft. At Sicily, the largest previous amphibious assault the Allies had used, perhaps 300 landing craft total. For Overlord, the Americans alone have brought nearly 8 times that number, and they're still building more. In American shipyards scattered across the continent, production continues at rates that seem impossible. At Evansville, Indiana, hundreds of miles from any ocean, the Missouri Valley Bridge and Iron Company is building LSTs in a converted riverside facility. At Seneca, Illinois, the Chicago Bridge and Iron Company is doing the same. LSTs built in landlocked cities, floated down rivers to the Gulf of Mexico, then sailed across the Atlantic to England. The logistics alone would be considered impossible in any previous war. But America in 1944 operates on a different scale. Military historian John Keegan would later write that American industrial production during World War II represented the greatest economic transformation in human history. IMDY. But for British officers watching this transformation materialize in their harbors, it's not history yet. It's overwhelming, slightly frightening present reality. Captain John Hughes Hallett, a British naval officer involved in planning since the early days, stands on a hill overlooking Weymouth Bay in April. Below him, more than 400 vessels pack the harbor, Beyond them, anchored in rows extending to the horizon, hundreds more wait. He turns to a colleague who fought at Dieppe, the disastrous 1942 raid, where landing craft shortages constrained the operation and contributed to catastrophic casualties. At Dieppe, we scraped together enough landing craft for 5,000 men. Most were destroyed. His colleague nods grimly, remembering. Now they're looking at a fleet being assembled to land 156,000 men on the first day alone, with reserves for follow-up waves. With enough capacity to keep supplies flowing for months. The scale is so beyond previous experience that it's almost abstract. Hughes Hallett watches an American LST maneuver into position. Its ungainly flat bottom making it slow and awkward in the water. They're not pretty, he says, but there are so damned many of them. By early May, the final count is becoming clear. Ramsay calls a conference of senior commanders at Southwick House. More than 100 officers, British, American, Canadian, French, crowd into the room. Ramsay stands before a massive map of the English Channel and the Normandy coast. Gentlemen, final disposition, 6,939 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 ancillary vessels, 864 merchant ships. He lets the numbers settle. Of these, the American contribution is approximately 3,000 vessels, including the majority of our LSTs and substantial fire support. The room is silent. Every officer present understands naval logistics, has spent careers managing fleets, calculating tonnages and capacities. They know these numbers represent not just ships, but the industrial output of an entire nation concentrated on a single objective. Admiral Sir Harold Burrow, who will command one of the British bombardment forces, speaks up. The last time England assembled a fleet this size was to fight the Spanish Armada, and that was to defend against invasion, not launch one. Ramsay nods. The last time anyone assembled a fleet this size was never. This is the largest naval operation in history, and it's only possible because of American production capacity. Outside Southwick House, spring is turning the English countryside green. In harbors along the coast, ships continue to arrive. American LSTs, LCIs, LCTs, American destroyers, cruisers, battleships, American Liberty ships carrying American trucks, American tanks, American ammunition, an American tanker fleet to fuel them all, American supply vessels with spare parts, food, medical equipment, the weight of American industry, transformed into floating steel, has crossed the Atlantic and settled into every available British anchorage. British troops assigned to embark for the invasion begin moving to their assembly areas in late May. They walk past American ships, hundreds of them on their way to their own transports. A British sergeant leading his platoon through Southampton docks pauses to stare at the harbor. Ships in every direction, hulls so tightly packed the water is barely visible. He turns to his corporal. Bloody hell. The Yanks really did bring everyone. The corporal, a veteran of North Africa and Italy who's seen American forces arrive in those theaters, nods. They always do, Sarge. They always do. In the final days before D-Day, British commanders make one last tour of their sectors. What they see defies comprehension, even for men who've spent their lives at sea. From Portland, Bill, looking west, ships to the horizon. From Portsmouth looking east, the same. The Solent has become a steel channel. Vessels anchored so close their hulls nearly touch. Admiral Ramsay, standing on the deck of HMS Scylla, his headquarters ship watches, as more American vessels maneuver into final positions. His chief of staff appears beside him. Sir, it's extraordinary. The Americans have delivered everything they promised. More, actually. Ramsay nods slowly. They did. They really did. There's wonder in his voice. Not wonder that America is rich or industrially powerful that's been known for decades. Wonder that promises made in smoky conference rooms 6 months ago have materialized as thousands of actual ships, each one built, manned, sailed across a submarine-infested ocean and positioned exactly where it needs to be. The American approach to warfare is becoming clear. Britain fights with what it has, carefully husbanding limited resources, making strategic choices about where to commit scarce assets. America fights by building what's needed, then building more, then building reserves for contingencies that may never happen. Different philosophies born from different circumstances. Britain, bombed, blockaded, stretched thin after 5 years of war. America, untouched at home, factories running at full capacity, supply lines unbroken. Ramsay understands both approaches, respects both. But watching the American invasion fleet fill British waters, he's grateful that American abundance is on his side. The Gathering Storm, June 3rd, 1944. The forecast is bad. Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower stands in the library at Southwick House, hands clasped behind his back, listening as Group Captain James Stagg, the chief meteorologist, delivers unwelcome news. Low pressure system moving through the channel. Heavy cloud cover, high winds, rough seas on June 5th. Conditions unsuitable for amphibious operations. The room is crowded with senior commanders. Admiral Ramsay, arms crossed, studies a weather chart. General Bernard Montgomery, commanding all ground forces, looks grimmer than usual. Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory shakes his head at the forecast his bombers need clear skies. And through the window, visible in the gathering dusk, lies the reason this forecast is catastrophic. The invasion fleet has already begun assembling. 6,939 vessels are either loaded with troops or moving toward final departure points. American LSTs packed with tanks and vehicles sit low in the water at Plymouth and Portland. British and Canadian transports at Portsmouth and Southampton are crammed with soldiers who've been briefed on their objectives and know the invasion is imminent. The intricate choreography of the largest amphibious operation in history has been set in motion. And now, the weather is refusing to cooperate. Eisenhower turns to Ramsay. Admiral, what happens if we postpone? Ramsay, who has spent 18 months planning every detail of Operation Neptune, the naval component of Overlord, doesn't need to consult notes. Sir, we have vessels already at sea. The minesweepers left yesterday to begin clearing channels. The slower convoys departed this morning. We can recall them, but it means reorganizing the entire fleet, refueling thousands of vessels, managing troops who've been sealed in assembly areas for days, and we'd lose the tidal conditions we need. The tides are critical. Planners want to land at low tide, so German beach obstacles are visible. But they also need enough water for landing craft to approach. The window tide, moonlight, and dawn arrival occurs only on June 5th, 6th, or 7th. After that, the next favorable window is 2 weeks away. 2 weeks of keeping 156,000 troops sealed in ports. 2 weeks of German reconnaissance, potentially discovering the massive fleet. 2 weeks where any number of things could go wrong. Eisenhower looks at each commander in turn. The weight of decision is visible on his face. Finally, voice quiet but firm. We postpone 24 hours, June 6th. If the weather improves, we go. If not, we reassess. The order goes out through the command structure with remarkable speed. At Plymouth, LSTs already at sea receive recall signals and begin turning back. At Portsmouth, troops who'd begun embarking are told to stand down temporarily. At Falmouth, ships that had started maneuvering into convoy formation drop anchor again. The massive, intricate clockwork of invasion stops, hesitates, prepares to try again. For British port commanders already stretched beyond capacity, the postponement is a nightmare of logistics. 6,000 ships, many loaded with troops, must be kept organized, supplied, fueled, and ready. And the Americans, whose abundance has been impressive, now demonstrate something equally important: their logistical redundancy. When British supply officers worry about fuel for a 24-hour delay, American logistics officers point to their tankers they brought extra. When questions arise about feeding troops sealed on ships, American supply vessels have enough rations for contingencies. When concerns surface about maintaining equipment in salt spray for another day, American support ships have spare parts, mechanics, supplies. They'd planned for delays. Not hoped for them, but planned for them. A British supply officer, watching American logistics teams distribute additional fuel and food with barely a hitch, shakes his head in professional admiration. They think in terms of abundance. We think in terms of scarcity. Different worldviews. June 4th passes in tense waiting. Troops remain sealed in assembly areas or aboard ships. The fleet sits motionless in harbors that have become temporary cities of steel, and everyone watches the weather. That evening, Eisenhower reconvenes his commanders. Group Captain Stagg delivers a new forecast, his voice carrying a note of cautious optimism. "Sirs, the low-pressure system is moving through faster than expected. We're forecasting a brief window of improved conditions on June 6th. Not ideal, we'll still have significant cloud cover and choppy seas, but adequate for operations. Adequate, not perfect. Not what anyone would choose, but adequate." Eisenhower looks around the room one more time. This is it. The decision that will determine whether tens of thousands of men live or die, whether the invasion succeeds or fails, whether the war takes a decisive turn or bogs down in another catastrophic setback. His voice, when it comes, is steady. "Okay, we'll go." Those three words, "okay, we'll go," will become one of the most famous military decisions in history. But in the moment, it's just a man making the best choice he can with imperfect information. The order goes out. Operation Overlord is on. June 5th, 1944. The invasion fleet begins to move. From the western ports, Plymouth, Falmouth, Dartmouth, the American Western Task Force under Rear Admiral Alan Kirk begins departing. LSTs form up in long columns, their flat bows cutting through choppy seas. Behind them come troop transports carrying the men who will assault Utah and Omaha beaches. Above them, the fire support ships Nevada, Texas, Arkansas take up positions, their heavy guns capable of bombarding German positions from miles offshore. From the eastern ports, Portsmouth, Southampton, New Haven, the British and Canadian forces move simultaneously. Admiral Vian's Eastern Task Force heads for Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. British destroyers and cruisers escort Canadian troop ships. Landing craft, loaded with British commandos and infantry, form their own convoys. The English Channel becomes a highway of ships, organized into 10 carefully planned lanes. Each lane swept clear of mines by advanced minesweepers, each convoy moving at prescribed speeds to hit the beaches in precise sequence. First wave, assault troops in LCVPs and LCIs. Second wave, tanks and heavy equipment in LSTs and LCTs. Third wave, artillery, supplies, and reinforcements. Follow-up waves scheduled for the next days, weeks, months. From headlands along the English coast, civilians watch the fleet depart. Most don't know where these ships are going. Invasion plans are top secret, but they can see the scale. Ships stretching from horizon to horizon. An armada so vast it seems to cover the entire channel. One British woman, watching from the cliffs near Dover, will later write in her diary, "I counted until I reached 200 ships, and there was still more coming. I realized then we were going to win this war. We had to. No one could assemble such a force and fail." Aboard HMS Scylla, Admiral Ramsay stands on the bridge as his flagship moves into the channel. Around him, the invasion fleet takes shape in the gathering darkness. Navigation lights, normally forbidden, are lit tonight, because the scale of the operation makes collision a greater risk than German detection. The effect is surreal. Thousands of lights moving across dark water like a city in motion. His chief of staff appears beside him. "Sir, all task forces report departing on schedule. Minesweepers have cleared 10 channels. No significant German naval activity detected." Ramsay nods, still watching the lights. He's coordinated complex operations before Dunkirk, the Mediterranean landings, but this is different in every way. Not desperate improvisation, but meticulous planning, not making do with insufficient resources, but having abundance, not hoping for success, but engineering it through overwhelming force. And the force, the sheer material weight of the invasion fleet is almost entirely American in origin. British vessels are essential. British planning is critical. British experience in combined operations has shaped the entire plan. But the raw industrial power, the thousands of landing craft and fire support ships and supply vessels that make this scale of operation feasible, comes from American shipyards. By dawn on June 6th, the fleet is in position off the Normandy coast. 5 task forces, each assigned to a beach. Each task force divided into groups, each group divided into waves. All of it choreographed with precision that took 18 months to plan and 6 months to assemble. At 0550 hours, the bombardment begins. The heavy guns of the battleships and cruisers open fire, their shells screaming over the invasion beaches to hammer German positions. The sound is continuous, a rolling thunder that can be heard in southern England 40 miles away. Nevada fires her 14-inch guns at targets 12 miles inland. Each shell creates explosions that send debris hundreds of feet into the air. Texas and Arkansas systematically destroy German bunkers and strongpoints, their fire controlled by spotter aircraft and coordinated with incredible precision. British cruisers, Warspite and Ramillies, add their guns to the bombardment, their decades of naval experience now focused on softening German defenses. At 0630 hours, the landing craft go in, thousands of them, wave after wave, carrying troops to 5 beaches across a 50-mile front. The scale of the operation becomes immediately visible. At Utah Beach, the American landing is almost unopposed initially, and troops pour ashore in overwhelming numbers. At Omaha, German resistance is fierce. The terrain favors defense, and casualties are horrific. But the sheer number of American vessels offshore means that, even with heavy losses, more troops keep coming, more supplies keep landing, more fire support keeps hammering German positions. The fleet makes Omaha survivable, not through any single heroic action, but through sheer, sustained pressure. Waves keep landing because there are enough landing craft to keep sending them. Casualties are evacuated because medical ships are standing by. Ammunition keeps flowing because supply vessels are orbiting offshore at Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. British and Canadian forces have their own battles, their own casualties, their own acts of heroism. But they're also supported by the logistics chain that American industrial capacity has made possible. Landing craft bringing troops, fire support ships suppressing German positions, supply vessels keeping equipment and ammunition flowing. By the end of D-Day, June 6th, 156,000 Allied troops are ashore in France. The invasion has succeeded, not easily, not without terrible cost, thousands dead, thousands wounded, but succeeded. And over the following days, weeks, and months, the invasion fleet continues its work. Landing craft make repeated trips across the channel. By the end of June, over 850,000 troops have been landed in Normandy, 148,000 vehicles, 570,000 tons of supplies, all of it crossing the channel in an endless procession of ships. The American vessels that packed British harbors in the spring are now shuttling back and forth in continuous operation, bringing the material weight of American industry to bear on Nazi Germany. Admiral Ramsay, filing his after-action reports in July, writes with characteristic British understatement, "The success of Operation Neptune was dependent upon the availability of sufficient landing craft and naval vessels. The American contribution of approximately 3,000 vessels was essential to achieving the required scale." Essential, the word, carries more weight than might appear. Not helpful, not appreciated. Essential. Without those 3,000 American vessels, overlord doesn't happen. Or it happens on a smaller scale with different odds and potentially different outcomes. The invasion fleet that British generals watched assemble in the spring of 1944 was not just impressive, it was determinative. It made possible an operation that would have been impossible with British resources alone. The hidden mathematics of victory. July 1944. The beaches of Normandy are no longer killing grounds. They've become highways. Endless streams of trucks, tanks, jeeps, and half-tracks roll off LSTs onto French sand, then rumble inland toward the expanding front lines. British General Bernard Montgomery stands on a bluff overlooking Gold Beach, binoculars raised, watching the flow of materiel. His chief of staff, Major General Francis de Guingand, stands beside him with a clipboard thick with logistics reports. How much tonnage landed yesterday? De Guingand consults his notes. 23,000 tons, sir. Today's projection is similar. The Americans are running their LSTs on continuous rotation. Beach, load, cross, unload, return. Some vessels are making 3 trips in 48 hours. Montgomery lowers his binoculars slowly. 3 trips in 48 hours. Each LST carries 20 Sherman tanks, or 33 trucks, or 150 tons of cargo. Melsevries. 3 trips means each vessel is delivering 450 tons every 2 days. Multiply that by the hundreds of LSTs in operation, and the mathematics become staggering. This is how you win wars, Montgomery says quietly. Not through brilliant tactics or brave charges. Through this. Overwhelming material superiority applied continuously until the enemy collapses. It's a lesson the British learned painfully in World War I, where German spring offensives in 1918 nearly broke through Allied lines until American troops arrived in such numbers that German commanders simply ran out of reserves. Now, a generation later, the same principle operates at industrial scale, but there's a darker calculation happening simultaneously, one that British commanders understand with grim clarity. At Caen, a city that was supposed to fall on D-Day, British and Canadian forces are locked in brutal urban warfare. German resistance is fierce, coordinated, professional. Panzer divisions that should have been destroyed by now are instead conducting skillful defensive operations, making the Allies pay in blood for every mile. Montgomery's original plan called for breaking out of the Normandy beachhead within 2 weeks. It's now mid-July, and the front lines have barely moved. American forces in the west, at Saint-Lô, face similar resistance. German defenders using hedgerows, ancient earth embankments topped with thick vegetation as ready-made fortifications. Each field becomes a small fortress, each hedgerow a defensive position that must be assaulted individually. American casualties are mounting. British casualties are mounting. The breakout everyone expected has become a grinding, attritional struggle, and this is where the invasion fleet's true importance becomes clear. Not in the dramatic landings of June 6th, but in the sustained logistics of July, August, September, because while German forces are fighting skillfully with the men and equipment they have, Allied forces are fighting with an endless stream of replacements, ammunition, fuel, and supplies delivered by those thousands of ships. At a supply depot behind Sword Beach, a British logistics officer watches American trucks being offloaded from an LST. New trucks, still painted in factory primer, driven off the ramp, fueled immediately from a tanker ship anchored offshore, and sent forward to replace vehicles lost to German fire or mechanical breakdown. A German logistics officer, if he could see this, would weep with envy. Wehrmacht supply lines in Normandy are collapsing. Allied air power has made daylight movement nearly suicidal. Fuel is critically short. German armor sits immobile for lack of gasoline. Ammunition is rationed. Replacements trickle forward in 1s and 2s instead of battalions. The German army in France is being strangled not by superior Allied tactics, but by the mathematics of industrial production. By August, the breakout finally comes. Operation Cobra, the American offensive launched from Saint-Lô, smashes through German lines with overwhelming force, not because American soldiers are braver or more skilled than their German opponents, but because they have so much artillery, so many tanks, so much air support that German defenses simply shatter under the weight. And behind that breakout, sustaining it, making it possible to exploit deep into France, is the logistics chain that runs back to the Normandy beaches and the invasion fleet. By the end of August, over 2 million Allied troops are in France, 447,000 vehicles, more than 4 million tons of supplies, all of it delivered across those same beaches by the same invasion fleet that British commanders watched assemble in spring. In release in Hever, General Dwight Eisenhower, touring the beachheads in September as Allied forces race across France toward Germany, stops to watch LSTs making their endless runs. His logistics chief, Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, stands beside him. Without these ships, Eisenhower says, none of this happens. We'd still be stuck in the bocage fighting over hedgerows. Lee nods. The landing craft are the unsung heroes, sir. No one writes songs about LSTs, but they're carrying this entire campaign. It's true. Military historians will write volumes about D-Day, the airborne drops, the beach assaults, the heroism of individual soldiers. They'll analyze Montgomery's strategy, Patton's breakout, the collapse of German defenses. But buried in logistics, annexes, and supply reports is the less dramatic truth. Victory was delivered by thousands of ungainly, flat-bottomed ships, making tens of thousands of trips across the Channel, carrying millions of tons of everything an army needs to fight. And almost all of those ships were built in American shipyards, by British planners who'd spent 5 years learning to fight with scarcity, by Americans who approached war through abundance. There's a moment in late September when this difference crystallizes with startling clarity. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery proposes Operation Market Garden, an audacious plan to drop airborne forces deep into Holland, seize bridges, and open a highway into Germany. The plan is bold, imaginative, typically Montgomery, but it requires enormous logistics support. Airborne divisions must be supplied by air. Ground forces must advance 60 miles in 48 hours. Fuel and ammunition must flow continuously. American General Omar Bradley, commanding U.S. forces, reviews the plan with his logistics staff. Can we support this? His supply officers run the numbers. It'll stretch us thin, sir. Every gallon of fuel we send north is a gallon we don't have for other operations. We can do it, but it means slowing the advance elsewhere. The Americans agree to support Market Garden because alliance politics require it. But there's skepticism in the American command about whether logistics can support such an ambitious operation. They're right to be skeptical. Market Garden launches in mid-September and quickly bogs down. British airborne forces at Arnhem, dropped too far from supporting ground troops, are isolated and eventually forced to withdraw after suffering heavy casualties. The operation fails not because of lack of courage or poor tactics, but because the logistics couldn't support the operational tempo Montgomery envisioned. 60 miles in 48 hours sounds achievable on a map, but when every mile requires fuel trucks, ammunition convoys, bridging equipment, and medical evacuation, the mathematics become brutally constraining. The Americans learn this lesson too, but in a different context. In December 1944, Germany launches a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, the Battle of the Bulge. German forces punch through American lines, creating a dangerous salient. For a moment, it looks like the kind of breakthrough that could change the war's momentum. But American logistics, that same abundance-based system that British commanders marveled at during the invasion buildup, responds with devastating efficiency. Within 48 hours, entire American divisions are being rerouted toward the Bulge. Ammunition, fuel, and supplies are redirected. The 101st Airborne Division, surrounded at Bastogne, is kept supplied by airdrops. And the vast network of supply ships still running between England and France keeps the pipeline flowing. German commanders, watching their offensive stall as American reinforcements arrive in overwhelming numbers, understand they've lost before the battle is even decided. Not lost tactically, German troops fight with skill and desperation. Lost mathematically. Germany can't replace losses, can't sustain the fuel consumption, can't match the flood of American men and materiel. By January 1945, the the bulge is eliminated, and Allied forces resume their advance into Germany. And through it all, through the grinding summer battles in Normandy, through Market Garden's failure, through the bulge's desperate fighting, the invasion fleet keeps working. LSTs make their runs. Liberty ships bring supplies from America to England. Tankers deliver fuel. Hospital ships evacuate wounded. The unglamorous arithmetic of logistics continues day after day after day. Admiral Bertram Ramsay, who coordinated this vast naval operation, dies in a plane crash in January 1945 while traveling to a conference. His death is barely noted in the press, overshadowed by dramatic battles on the front lines. But the officers who worked with him understand what's been lost. Ramsay was the architect of the largest naval operation in history. He coordinated 7,000 ships from multiple nations into a single coordinated force. He planned the invasion that made Allied victory in Western Europe possible. And he did it by understanding that modern warfare is ultimately about logistics, getting enough men and supplies to the right place at the right time. The Americans understood this too, but approached it differently. British logistics. Careful calculation of minimal necessary resources. American logistics. Calculate what's needed, then bring twice that much. Neither approach is inherently superior. Britain's worked brilliantly given resource constraints. America's worked because they had the industrial capacity to support it. But combined British planning married to American abundance, the result was overwhelming. By spring 1945, Allied forces are deep inside Germany. The war in Europe is in its final weeks. And looking back at the entire campaign from D-Day forward, one fact is inescapable. The invasion fleet that British commanders watched assemble in 1944 didn't just enable D-Day. It sustained every operation afterward, carried every offensive, delivered the material weight that crushed German resistance through sheer accumulated mass. Military historian Max Hastings would later write that Allied victory in Normandy was preordained by industrial capacity. Not inevitable, soldiers still had to fight. Commanders still had to make decisions. Tactical execution still mattered. But preordained in the sense that once the logistics system was in place, once the flow of supplies became continuous and overwhelming, German defeat was a matter of time. And that logistics system was built on the foundation of American shipbuilding. Those thousands of LSTs, LCIs, LCVPs, those Liberty ships and tankers and supply vessels, all built in American yards, sailed across the Atlantic, assembled in British harbors, and employed in continuous operation for nearly a year. The invasion fleet wasn't just the largest naval operation in history. It was the logistical backbone of Allied victory in Western Europe, the echo of steel. November 1945. The war in Europe has been over for 6 months. In harbors along England's southern coast, the invasion fleet is being dismantled. LSTs that carried tanks to Normandy are being sailed back to America or scrapped for metal. Liberty ships are being decommissioned, their crews dispersed. The vast naval parking lot that British officers marveled at in spring 1944 is emptying. At Portsmouth, Harbour Master Captain James Wilkes walks the docks one last time before his retirement. The harbour is almost empty now. A few vessels remain, some undergoing repairs, some awaiting final disposition, but the dense forest of masts and superstructures is gone. He stops at the spot where he stood in February 1944, trying to figure out where to anchor yet another convoy of American ships. The water is visible again. The sea has returned. A young lieutenant, newly assigned to the port, finds him there. "Sir, they say you were here during the buildup, when the Americans brought their fleet." Wilkes nods slowly. "I was. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. Ships everywhere, packed so tight you could walk from one side of the harbor to the other on their decks." The lieutenant looks around at the mostly empty harbor, trying to imagine it. Must have been something. Wilkes smiles slightly. It was. It really was. Across the Atlantic, in American ports, a different kind of accounting is taking place. Shipyards that built landing craft by the hundreds are retooling for peacetime production. Workers who welded LSTs are being laid off or shifted to commercial vessel construction. The vast wartime mobilization that produced the invasion fleet is winding down. At the Higgins Industries shipyard in New Orleans, Andrew Higgins, the boat builder whose LCVP design became the workhorse of amphibious warfare, watches the last landing craft roll off his production line. His company built more than 20,000 landing craft during the war. Now, with no more military orders, he'll struggle to keep the business afloat in peacetime. But standing there, watching the final LCVP completed, he allows himself a moment of pride. Those boats carried men to the beaches, brought them home, did exactly what they were supposed to do. His chief engineer nods. They're saying Eisenhower called the LCVP the boat that won the war. That true? Higgins shrugs. He said something like that. Probably gave the same credit to tanks and bombers and a dozen other things. But yeah, he said it. The quote, whether precisely accurate or embellished, captures a truth that military historians will spend decades analyzing. The LCVP, and landing craft like it, were force multipliers of staggering importance. They turned amphibious assault from a tactical gamble into an operational certainty. They made D-Day possible on the scale required for success. In Britain, the post-war years bring austerity and reconstruction. The nation that stood alone against Nazi Germany in 1940 is exhausted, broke, and facing the loss of its empire. British officers who commanded forces in Normandy are writing their memoirs, analyzing the campaign, trying to extract lessons from victory. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, never one for false modesty, will claim in his writings that his strategic vision was decisive. He's not entirely wrong. British planning and experience in combined operations shaped much of Overlord, but American officers, writing their own accounts, will emphasize material superiority and logistics. Also not wrong. The truth, as usual in complex military operations, is multifaceted. British planning married to American industrial capacity. British tactical experience combined with American operational scale. Neither nation could have pulled off D-Day alone. But there's a quieter truth that British officers acknowledge in private conversations, if not always in published memoirs. The scale that made victory possible, the overwhelming material superiority that crushed German resistance through accumulated weight, came from American shipyards. Admiral Sir Harold Burrow, reflecting on the campaign in his retirement, puts it simply in a letter to a fellow officer. We knew how to plan an invasion. We'd done amphibious operations in the Mediterranean, but we couldn't have built the fleet required for Normandy. Not in time, not in sufficient numbers. The Americans did that, and it made all the difference. The invasion fleet's legacy extends far beyond World War II. The techniques developed for D-Day specialized landing craft, pre-positioned supplies, continuous logistics chains, will shape amphibious warfare for generations. The U.S. Marine Corps will study Overlord's logistics as a template for Pacific Island invasions. Future amphibious operations in Korea, Vietnam, and the Middle East will trace their lineage back to the Normandy beaches. And the broader lesson that modern warfare is ultimately decided by industrial capacity and logistics will become doctrine. Military academies will teach it. Defense planners will build strategies around it. Future wars will be won or lost based on which side can produce, transport, and sustain more material in the field. But there's also a more subtle legacy, one that British commanders absorbed watching the American fleet assemble in 1944. The realization that Britain, for all its history and experience, could no longer conduct major military operations independently. The empire that had ruled a quarter of the globe now depended on American support for basic logistical capability. This wasn't a comfortable realization. British national identity had been built on naval supremacy, on the Royal Navy's ability to project power globally. Watching American ships fill British harbors, needing American ships to launch an invasion from British soil, was psychologically jarring. Churchill, in his post-war writings, will frame this as the special relationship equal partners united by common values and shared sacrifice. And there's truth in that framing. Britain and America were allies in the deepest sense, fighting together for principles that transcended national interest. But the alliance was never truly equal in material terms. America brought industrial capacity that Britain couldn't match. British officers recognized this, accommodated it, worked within it, and ultimately benefited from it. Allied victory was achieved, after all, but the recognition remained. In December 1945, at a reunion dinner for officers who'd planned Operation Neptune, Admiral Vian rises to make a toast. The room is full of British and American naval officers, men who'd coordinated the largest naval operation in history. Vian raises his glass to our American friends, who brought the tools that made the job possible. It's gracious, genuine, and carries a subtext that everyone in the room understands. Tools. The Americans brought the tools, ships, landing craft, industrial output. The British brought expertise, planning, operational experience. Together, they'd won. But alone, neither could have done it. The American officers accept the toast with good humor and reciprocal tributes to British planning, but they also understand what's being acknowledged. America has become the dominant partner in the Atlantic Alliance, not through conquest or imposition, but through sheer material weight. The invasion fleet that filled British harbors in 1944 was proof of concept. America could mobilize industrial capacity on scales that dwarfed traditional European powers, could build what was needed, then build more, then build reserves, could think in terms of abundance while others thought in terms of scarcity. This will shape the post-war world in ways that extend far beyond military operations. The Marshall Plan, American economic aid rebuilding Europe, will follow the same logic as the invasion fleet. Calculate what's needed, then provide more than expected. Sustain it continuously until success is achieved. American cultural influence spreading globally will follow similar patterns, not imposed through force, but simply overwhelming through sheer volume and attractiveness. But in November 1945, watching the invasion fleet be dismantled in British harbors, these future developments aren't yet visible. What's visible is the end of something extraordinary. For 6 months in 1944, the English Channel was transformed into a highway of ships, moving men and materiel on scales never before attempted. For 6 months, the industrial output of American shipyards sustained an invasion that liberated Western Europe. For 6 months, British planning and American abundance combined to achieve something neither could have accomplished alone. And now it's over. The ships are going home, or to scrapyards. The harbors are emptying. The extraordinary becomes memory. Captain Wilkes, standing on the Portsmouth docks, watches the sun set over a nearly empty harbor. The young lieutenant who'd asked about the buildup appears beside him again. "Sir, what was it like? Really like?" Wilkes considers the question carefully. "It was overwhelming. Not frightening, exactly, but humbling. You'd spend your whole career learning about naval logistics, understanding what was possible, what the limits were. And then the Americans showed up and the limits just disappeared. They built what was needed, brought it across an ocean, parked it in our harbors so densely you couldn't see the water, and then used it to win a war." He pauses, searching for the right words. We knew they were rich, knew they had factories and resources we didn't. But knowing and seeing are different things. Seeing thousands of ships, all built in 2 years, all positioned exactly where they needed to be. That's when you understood what American industrial power actually meant. The lieutenant nods slowly, trying to absorb it. Wilkes turns to leave, then stops. One more thing. It wasn't just that they had so much. It's that they thought differently. We'd calculate what we needed and try to get it. They'd calculate what they needed and bring twice that much, just in case. Different philosophy, different kind of war. As he walks away from the empty harbor, Wilkes reflects on what the invasion fleet represented. Not just ships and tonnage, though the numbers were staggering. Not just industrial capacity, though that was decisive, but a fundamental shift in how wars were fought and won. For centuries, military power had been about tactical brilliance, strategic genius, the skillful employment of limited resources. And those things still mattered. Bad tactics could lose battles. Poor strategy could lose campaigns. But World War II proved that industrial capacity, properly mobilized and sustained, could overwhelm even brilliant tactics and sound strategy. Germany had skilled generals, experienced troops, advanced technology. But Germany couldn't match Allied production, couldn't replace losses at Allied rates, couldn't sustain operations when supplies ran out. The invasion fleet that British commanders watched assemble in 1944 was the physical manifestation of this truth. 7,000 ships representing the accumulated output of an industrial democracy mobilized for total war, applied continuously, systematically, until resistance collapsed. Military historian John Keegan, writing decades later, will argue that D-Day was the most important event of the 20th century. Not because of the battle itself. Other battles were larger, bloodier, more tactically complex, but because it represented the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The moment when Allied material superiority, transported across the Channel by thousands of ships, began grinding down German resistance through sheer accumulated weight. And that fleet, those ships, that capacity to deliver overwhelming force, almost all of it came from American shipyards, built by American workers, designed by American engineers, sailed by American crews, coordinated with British planners to achieve common goals. The sun sets fully on Portsmouth Harbor. The water is dark now, empty of ships, but the memory of what filled those waters in spring 1944 will persist. In military academies where future officers study logistics, in naval histories that analyze the largest amphibious operation ever conducted, in the quiet recollections of aging veterans who remember watching an armada assemble that was large enough to make the sea disappear beneath steel hulls. The invasion fleet is gone, but its legacy, the proof that modern wars are won through industrial capacity and sustained logistics, endures. Britain learned it, watching American ships fill their harbors. Germany learned it, losing to an enemy who could replace every loss, resupply every unit, sustain every offensive. And future strategists, planning future conflicts, will remember the lesson. In war, as in so much else, mathematics matters. And in 1944, the mathematics overwhelmingly favored the Allies, because America